Namo tassa, bhagavato, arahato, sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa, bhagavato, arahato, sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa, bhagavato, arahato, sama sambuddhassa. Hello again, everybody. Glad to see you, glad to be practicing with you and continuing our practice of the Maha Satipatthana Sutta. It is my hope that as we've been engaging with this, it has been informative to your practice. And that as we go over each section of the sutta slowly, that it helps you to unravel what's happening in your practice and your life in the way that I think the Buddha intended for it to. And I got to say, for me, one of the most striking things of this experience has been seeing how this was taught in a way to help us untangle a little step at a time. And I think about that as we look at each section. I think it's important to understand part of what the Buddha was about in his time was to help to kind of confront a misunderstanding of the practices of his time. Because what he saw that was different was this idea of a self that we feel like needs to be protected and grown and change, and that the chief teaching of the time was that your anatta would be unified with God if it was purified enough. And so his examination is a careful deconstruction of that thing which we find that we call ourselves. And we start by developing concentration with our breath, and we walk through several phenomena that we see that we all can collectively say, yes, we see this and we experience this ourselves. And so today we're going to talk about the 6 sense bases. So I hope that we all come to our senses, as it were. And I'll share my screen and we'll take a look as we've been doing at the sutta itself. And last week we discussed this 5 clinging aggregates. The idea that there is a case where we can see that there's form, that there's origination and disappearance of all of the aggregates of our existence. And we continue that look today as we look at the senses. So, furthermore, the monk remains focused on mental qualities in and of themselves with reference to the 6-fold internal and external sense media. And how does he remain focused on mental qualities in and of themselves with reference to the 6-fold internal and external sense media? There's the case where he discerns the eye, he discerns forms, he discerns the fetter that arises upon both. He discerns how there is an arising of an unarisen fetter, and he discerns how there is an abandoning of a fetter once it has arisen. And he discerns how there is no future arising of a fetter that has been abandoned. And then as it has before, it refers here to the sutta itself would carry and repeat each one of these. But that, what are we talking about? Those sense media, the ear, the nose, in addition to the view eye, there's the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and intellect or mind. And in this way, he remains focused internally on mental qualities in and of themselves, and focused externally, as we've seen before, unsustained by anything in the world. This is how a monk remains focused on the mental qualities in and of themselves. So we're talking about mental qualities. This is a section in the Satipatthana Sutta about mental qualities, but he's talking about our senses. So let's talk about senses for a minute. I really hope that today's discussion is a very lively and introspective discussion. I absolutely invite you to consider these thoughts for yourself from your view. Don't spend your energy paying attention to what I'm saying. Pay attention to what you're experiencing. And so let's talk about our senses. I remember when I was in elementary school and we do the first little bit of biology. They say, okay, here's your senses. You got your vision, your sight, smell, taste, touch, right? Well, the Buddha's going to add to this, and he's going to add your mind as one of those senses. But we all remember that, I think, maybe, when we first started playing with that in school. When we talk about taste and different kinds of taste, sweet, salty, bitter, we talk about seeing and, vision, and we talk about hearing and the things that we hear. And those senses are the ways that we gather the information from the world around us. So let me share my PowerPoint for this week. And we can look at this kind of together. So the Saḍāyatana, or Saḍāyatana, it's spelled with a D or an L, but that D has got kind of a soft, it's kind of a softy. Saḍāyatana, or the six sense bases. The Sa means, is the part word means six, and it's the reference to the number of bases or realms. Ayatana, this term is more complex. It refers to base, realm, or sphere. It's often used in Buddhist texts to denote areas or fields of sensory experience and interaction. The word itself can be understood to mean a place or foundation for something to exist. In this case, the process of sensory perception and cognitive activity. That's a lot of words. Where do you experience vision? Think about that a second. Where do you experience vision? Where do you experience smell? What is that experience like? Where do you experience taste? Is taste something that just happens on the tongue? And where do you experience touch? How do you experience touch? And what do you experience when you experience mind? If I say have an experience of mind, is that something that you can relate to? Like you can think? An experience of mind. Lots of words today. And how does he remain focused on mental qualities in and of themselves with reference to the sixfold internal and external sense media? There's a case where he discerns the eye, ear, the nose, tongue, body, and intellect. He discerns forms. He discerns the fetter that arises on both. He discerns how there is a rising of an unrisen fetter. And he discerns how the abandoning of the fetter once it has risen. And he discerns how there is no future arising of the fetter once it's abandoned. So this is me breaking down the text of this sutta a little bit more so we can look at it again together, and let's take a look at that. So we talk about the sense: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and intellect. And we can see that sense. We can see the sphere in which it exists a little bit. I think we can get a sense of that sense. But notice that that is just the first part of what he talks about. What he talks about here is he discerns that when there are forms, that comes from vision, then he discerns that the fetter that arises upon both. So he talks about the fetters. So what are the fetters? Oops, I clicked on something. Screen. So looking at this sense base, we can see eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind kind of as separate sense spheres, places where we experience this. So I'm going to ask you to do something here in a second. We're going to start to experiment with this. And when I do, what I want you to do is kind of notice, where does the mind meet the sense? Let's say that again. When I ask you to do this thing in a second, I want you to see if you can discern for yourself, see for yourself, the instance in which your mind comes out to meet that sensation. Does that make sense? Just that phrase. Where does the mind arise to meet the sensation? So try this on for size. Take a minute, move your gaze away from the screen and look around your environment and find the first thing you see. Do you see where your mind arises to meet that thing that you see? A form falls within the vision of the eye, and the corresponding conjunction takes place. And then the mind does a thing. Stop sharing for a minute. So thinking about that, I have a coffee cup. It's my coffee cup. I turned and I looked, and as soon as I saw it, I thought, coffee cup, right? Is this just a coffee cup? Oh, wait, it's got Hawaii on it. I bought this coffee cup when I was in Hawaii. Oh, I remember my trip to Hawaii. I remember the sunshine in Hawaii. I remember that island. There's Maui. I remember what Maui was like. Do you see the corresponding conjunction taking place and the way that the mind arises to meet it? Do you see the sensation of mind taking my memories, Maui, and applying it to a physical object, coffee cup? How about you? Chris, you got one? You're muted, but yeah, turn it on. What'd you get?
So here we go. I'm looking at the lamp on the wall, but actually, how it is my eyes say there's a thing there, and then my mind reaches out and imposes upon it lamp.
Right. And how does it know it's a lamp?
It decided it was a lamp
From
its apprehension of other lamps. Right.
Memory, right? Some stored piece of memory, a sense that came out to meet the physical object when it crossed your eye. Does that make sense? How about you, Linda?
I don't know. Well, first thing, and I looked around and I see a stack of towels over there, and I guess for me, I was kind of trying to determine, it's like, am I noticing that my mind is noticing, or is my mind noticing it? Does that make sense? That makes any sense?
Yeah.
So
well,
that was where I went with.
Question.
Yeah. So when you went back, and I was like, well, I immediately identify it as a towel. So I guess maybe when I was looking for an object, so maybe my mind was already going along those lines.
Well, and it can be interesting. I see a stack of towels, and that reminds me I need to put my laundry away. Oh, I feel bad that I didn't put my laundry away. Now all of a sudden there's a feeling comes in that's conjunctioned to that towel, right? And that arose. And so and what you talk about is the idea of just even the thinking about thinking, right? Just thinking about thinking. What do I see? What order of events does this come in? Thinking about thinking. All right, Alina, you got your hand up. Unmute your microphone. You got to tell us what you saw.
I didn't actually have my hand up. I was just pointing out in my head. I was interacting physically with my space as I observed the characteristics of mind touching that sense object. Okay, so I looked and saw my guitar, and then I looked a few more times, and I tried to see if I could catch the moment where I'm identifying it as a separate object from everything else, if that makes sense. And after a couple of times, I was able to catch, even like almost able to do it the first time with the guitar, and definitely the second time with the painting, and then the third time by my little medicine Buddha statue. And like just observing that as I go there to the place, like there's almost this sense like in a movie where it goes from foreground, like out of focus, to in focus as a specific object. Kind of cinematic. And looking around after some time, and this is when I had my hand up, I was like, there's a different way in which I'm looking around when I'm not noticing, in which case it's background, almost like it might as well be two-dimensional, versus when I'm noticing it as an independent object, which is when the mind is bothering to, like the eyes are focusing in, and it's more three-dimensional. So it was, if that makes sense, kind of like cinema, like and with the guitar specifically, there's noticing that it's a guitar, and then I could notice a couple of thought forms, some around where my former guitar teacher had a similar guitar on her wall. There's a sadness that she's not teaching right now. There is a sense of I should be playing the guitar more.
Right. Yeah. Guilt
Yeah.
comes in because I haven't been practicing. Yeah.
Guilt arises. So yeah, so I was just thinking of all those layers as I had my hand up.
Interesting, because you lift your hand and subconsciously, and I've done this, subconsciously, it's as if your sense of touch is reaching out to try to find, where am I in the universe? You know, I see an object. There's an object. Here am I. How can I reach out and touch that object in the universe? And that brings us to the sense of touch, which is also part of what we're talking about here, right? And what part of you is trying to observe touch? Where is that arising?
And it's so interesting because the fact that touch came in, touch is like a dominant sense when you're playing guitar. So those neurons in my brain that are tied to all of the guitar thoughts must be really linked to the sense of touch. So the sense of touch like wants to turn on. So my hand is going through space toward the guitar, right? So like pressure is the wrong word, but like some drive to touch arises as like those parts of the brain get like activated together.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, let's keep going, because we got other senses. But that is, I think you're spot on. Good observations. Yeah, touch and vision connected in that way too. Vicky, how about you?
In listening to what others saw in that exercise, I go, well, I didn't see that much.
That's okay.
What I was conscious of was there was a sense of, I quickly moved to a plant. It's a good sized plant. And saw it as a plant, but wanting to answer the question of where does that meet? It's somewhere in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
It was my sense of that object in my mind met somewhere in the middle to identify.
Yeah.
Or to recognize, to name it.
So could it happen without the two things, without the looking, the vision, and the object? Could that thing come together? Like my coffee cup example. Like it's an object, it's a physical object, but until my mind identifies it as a coffee cup and sees its function, like, does it quite exist in the same way? Like it doesn't exist. It exists in my mind as a thing that arises, just the same as a sense of smell or a sense of taste. Like my mind, it arises and it wraps itself around it and tries to understand and runs around looking at some parts of it. So
okay. Well, so if I don't know what it is, I have no experience, it's a totally alien object. I believe my mind would approach it much differently, or maybe more slowly, or with inquiry or fear. What is that object?
Yeah. And we're doing the work of the inquiry here. This is important. This is the important work, right? Mm-hmm. So then here's a question. We talked about the plant and the nature of the plant and to you. We talked about Elena's guitar and she needs to practice guitar more. And we talked about Linda's got laundry to put away, and Chris has memories of lamps, right? And I like Maui. And we talked about, and all that stuff kind of comes about, right? So can we see that it's not just the object? It's not just coffee cup. I like coffee, or for that matter, what I really am seeing here is my Maui coffee cup. So I'm thinking about Maui. Can I see this object without loving Maui? Without that arising? Can you see the object? Can you see the towel without really identifying as a towel or laundry or any of those things? Can you come in and catch the part where your mind identifies that, but not have the conjunction take place? Think about that a little. Maybe try another object up for size. Can you see it? Acknowledge its existence without bringing your memory to it. With that said, I'm going to share my presentations and we'll keep going. We're going to take a look at what are we really talking about. So the second half of this is about fetters. And I'll explain fetters. The fetters are one of these critical Buddhist concepts that we use a lot, but let's think about it a little bit. So sam, prefix in Pali that can be understood as together or conjoined, complete, often denotes a sense of combination or union. Yojana, derived from the yuj, which means to yoke, to join, or to bind. Yojana, in various contexts, can refer to the act of binding or tying together, and by extension, something that binds or ties. Therefore, samyojana can be translated as that which binds together, or simply fetter. It metaphorically refers to the mental bindings or ties that yoke beings to cycle of birth and death and rebirth, and keep them entangled in suffering. The concept of samyojana is central in Buddhist teachings on the path to liberation, highlighting the importance of understanding and eventually breaking these fetters free to achieve nibbana. So, a fetter with my coffee cup is my love for Maui. That when I see the coffee cup, arises in me thoughts and memories and desires and delight about Maui, and then I want to do some more of that. I want some more, go to Maui. Can you see that even that pleasurable thing for me can be a fetter? Because it's blocking me from thinking about, from getting just clear and clean from fetters, and to where I have to, when I see the coffee cup, think of Maui. Like that arises. Does that make sense to everybody? I'm going to keep going. So this picture of the chains, this is the literal, like in the Buddha's time, when he's talking about fetters, he's talking about chained ankles and arms. Like this is what we're talking about. We're talking about the chains that bind us to suffering and subsequently birth and death and rebirth and all of samsara. And so what are the 10 fetters? The 10 fetters are sensual desire, ill will, self-views, doubt, clinging to rites and rituals, craving for material existence, that's craving for living in form and life, craving for immaterial existence, to be living outside of form, conceit, like self-view, restlessness, and we see that restlessness in our meditation as our mind bounces around, and ignorance, being unaware of things that are part of your reality. So these are the fetters. These are the things identified as letting go of these 10 fetters will equal awaken. That's the deal. This is what the Buddha says very clearly, that these fetters are the thing that keeps one bound to suffering, and that if you could let go of these 10 things, if you could unbind these 10 chains, that you'd be able to break free from it. So here he's saying, you discern with the eye, you see how you discern things with the eye, and you discern forms. And then you can see that the fetters arise depending on both things. You see the guitar, the fetter of I should practice more arises. Where's that fetter come from? What are the memories that tell you that that's true? I have my instructor, and I wish she was still teaching, and I wish I was doing that thing still. And you can discern how there is an abandoning of a fetter once it's arisen. Like, boy, I really like Maui, but maybe I'll never see Maui again. That's okay. I enjoyed my time there. No point in holding on to those emotions. Maybe that's the unbinding of that fetter. I don't have to be necessarily bound to those thoughts and ideas. And then you can see how there's no arising of fetters once they've been abandoned in the future. So ill will. I've abandoned having ill will. So when I see that jerk that I work with, I don't have ill will towards him, right? So I stopped calling him a jerk, and I start calling him Tom, and I start understanding Tom a little better and a little different, and that fetter is abandoned. So let's look at this, each one of these a little bit in turn, and have a little more fun group discussion. So we looked at I, and we looked at when you saw something, could you see where the mind rose up and met it? Could you see where it arose? And can you see where it falls away? So we didn't really talk about the falls away, but you have already glanced away from those objects, and those things that you were glancing at have fallen out of your sense of your mind sense. So let's talk about this with the eye a little bit. Here's a question. When a sight captures my attention, does it fill me with longing or sometimes repulsion? And what does that reveal about my inner world? So we talked about this a little bit. You saw something. Any thoughts before I continue about sight? You want to share anything else about the idea of when something falls into your sight, how it impacts your inner world? I'm going to stop sharing for a minute and just see. Think about that. You see something, how does it impact your inner world?
For me, it impacts it quite a bit at times, or I've been aware of that, heightened aware of that at times.
Yeah.
To the point where just in my life, I've either rearranged something or I'll just talk about physically or seeing in my space. And I've arranged my space to be more calm and comfortable consciously. I don't know if that's in that area that we're talking about. Yeah. And why do I want to walk around my space and see something that doesn't, at least isn't neutral and or give me some moment of pleasure, a smile, a memory. Maybe it's bittersweet, but it's real too, I think is the other thing.
Let's unpack that just a little bit.
Mhm.
So I'm for this, and I hear what you're saying. When I split up with my ex-wife, I realized very quickly that my entire house and everything I saw and everything I looked in any direction represented a union that had split apart, and it burned. It didn't matter what it was. It could be a coffee cup, it could be whatever, and it burned. And I didn't like that, and I wanted to get away from that. And so for a while, I just didn't come home. And then after a while, I had to come home and I had to muscle through, like get the old stuff out and change the color paint on the wall so that I could see. But seeing that stuff arising, how did it arise? How do I abandon it? How does it not arise again in the future? And so now we see that this is not necessarily a self-experience. It's an arising of senses. It's an arising of a sight. It's a rising of a thought. That these things are transient, that they come and go. But is it a good idea to go out of your way to fill your space with stuff that makes you feel good? Is that clinging?
Sorts, yeah, I would say.
Yeah. Oh, this is a tough one. Even the stuff I don't like, or even the stuff I like.
Well,
Yeah.
Are you muted?
No, we're
Okay.
muted.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I was going to say, what's interesting about this is that to go back to what you're demonstrating in the definition, right? A thing that you see, puts itself to where your mind has to engage with it, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you have the thing there, and we're hardwired in this way because obviously, if you saw something and couldn't recognize that it was a lion, that would end your career really quickly.
Yeah.
Right.
End your life.
and it was like it ended your experiment in this incarnation, and so it's like that's part of the kind of the biological function of the eyes, and yet here we are as beings with this equipment that's designed to draw our attention to things, and it's like when you encounter something, you see something, your mind diverts to it to describe it, articulate it, and yeah, we can have strategies like in a world of clinging and aversions, right? Fill your stuff with things that make you happy, So many years ago, I was a big fan of animes. Had all this anime crap everywhere, right? I'd walk into my happy space, but then after a while, when I thought, oh, there's a kind of this is not really fulfilling me, then I would walk into it. It would remind me how dysfunctional that was, right? And so I have to kind of rearrange my world again. And so it's an interesting piece because you could actually have fond memories, and you say, I'm going to populate my place with fond memories. Like, when the marriage is going well, and then now that the marriage is gone, all the things you populated the space to remind you how much you enjoyed it, acutely remind you everything doesn't work. And there's an interesting idea of like that it comes into your space. There's a certain point where you're just going to acknowledge it. And the challenge is can I see it, say what it is, without bringing my cocktail of attachments, that heap of considerations, without that just simply pouring out on top of it.
Yeah, precisely. And I like that we're seeing this together. I like that other people are using their words to describe this experience, because it does become about choiceless awareness. Like, I'm aware, but I don't necessarily choose that couch hurts my feelings because it's the couch I bought with my ex-wife, right? Like, it's choices. There is a couch. It's not necessarily all the baggage I bring to the couch. It's not necessarily that other color of paint on the wall is going to make it right. And if I just have that, then that'll be okay. Slowly but surely, we can see right here with our senses, the thing that we take as most real, that there's a lot more going on there that we bring to the party. That's not just the simple awareness of what's happening. So choiceless awareness, can you be present without the baggage?
Why would I want to be?
Why would you want to be present without the baggage? Well, that's a good question. Maybe I want to have that experience of life, of looking at that and saying, that which was my good relationship is now toast, and I'm burning from it, and it hurts, and I'm on fire, but I'm going to experience this anyway because it's part of life. And so I'm enjoying this part of life. Or maybe I say, I'm so glad I've met you. Let's pick out a couch together. We're madly in love. It's the best couch ever. Let's sit on that couch. It'll be great. And we'll have that forever. Where's the folly in that? It's inherent in that description, because things change. And if we cling too hard to the things we like, they can rapidly become things we don't like. So picking and choosing isn't necessarily doing us any favors.
So, Pete, when you say it, it's like the fact of the matter is we attain to the practice as we're learning in this technique, then it just becomes yet another reminder of impermanence of everything. And at a certain point, it can just go back to being an assemblage of wood and cushions and fabric, and no longer necessarily be a reminder of what was, or dashed aspirations, or suffering. It can actually just be what it is, which is an assemblage of wood and fiber and such. Like taking the couch for an example.
Maybe the assemblage of wood, that's okay. It exists in that way. There's no, that's how it exists. It's the fact that there's an illusion to what it represents. That illusion exists here. I'm the only one who relates to the couch in that way, And so the illusion is the thing that this tells us about. It tells us about the fetter, the place where I'm bound. I'm bound to the couch. I'm bound to that coffee cup. Linda's bound to her laundry. Chris is bound to the lamp. We all are bound, but it's what we bring. And yet we're bound, we're fettered by both the part of us that just really hates it and the part of us that loves it. Both things bind us. That's tricky business in Buddhism that people don't like to think about, but in the end, when you start looking at it, it's actually slightly more liberating than just it being great all the time. It's slightly more liberating because I'm existing with what is, and I'm peaceful and content with that. So we're able to arise this amount of wisdom just from this little paragraph, just from seeing this little piece. How many times, again, this is an example of the sutta and how we glance right over it. Okay, I've got senses, I get it. What's next? But this little piece is actually really critical to some of the other things that the Buddha points to. This is probably the place where the whole thing breaks. Because eventually we'll hear that we go on and his teachings talks about dependent origination, how things arise, the steps in which they arise, that they come together in a certain way. And you reach this point where you identify a thing in the world and then you inject into it and you say, I have a feeling about that. And because I have a feeling about that, I want more of it or I don't want more of it. And then you continue that cycle of chasing or putting away whatever it is that you're after. But we really can back it off all the way to just a simple one at a time look at our senses and see that these are not permanent things. This sense of vision is not a permanent thing. What is in my vision will change as soon as I look away. So if I were to take my environment as something that I need to be permanent and lasting and great like this, because when I see it, I want it to make me feel good, then that, like Chris says, that can't stay either. After a while, those things are boring. After a while, those things change. And so we can see that change evident in that sense. And I have so many more slides, and we're digging into this, but let me buzz through the other senses here really quick with some questions, and you guys see what you think. So moving on from the sense of, oops, go back. See how that goes. Slide 9. Okay. So we looked at the eye. Now let's look at hearing. So close your eyes and notice the first thing you hear this time. Right away, I noticed I have a fan in the background that you probably can't hear, but my attention came to as soon as I closed my eyes. Did you guys notice something when you closed your eyes?
Same thing. I have a fan going too. Yep.
Can you see the point at which you close your eyes, and since the sense of sight is off, your attention immediately moves to the next best thing? Like it immediately moves. Your attention immediately moves to hearing. And there's a lot. That's a lot of why we close our eyes in meditation, is to block out that sense door. Chris, you were gonna say something?
I was just going to say, I hear somewhere in the distance either a clock ticking or water dripping.
Alina, what do you hear?
There's a truck idling outside.
Linda?
I actually noticed the buzzing in my own ears.
Yeah, I have bad tinnitus. That happens to me too.
It's like the very first thing is I was actually trying to listen for something, and the first thing I picked up was my own ears, the buzzing.
So do you guys get a sense of how the mind arises to meet these things, like where the mind moves to meet these things? And that begs this question. Have I noticed how certain sounds can instantly change my mood? What is the story behind my reaction to these sounds? Let's say we stopped and you heard somebody scream for help outside. What would your mind do? Would it arise to that? Have you ever been at work and had to be in a super noisy environment for a long period of time? And then you leave that noisy environment and you step outside into the quiet? How does that influence your mind and your mood and your feelings? All right, let's keep going.
Wait.
Oh, we got something. All right,
I have a point I would like to discuss.
Yeah.
or I guess share, and I'm curious what your take on this. I have a strong aversion to certain noises, specifically like extremely loud, low frequency, like traffic noise, like a motorcycle, that thing they do where they're like vroom vroom, like, you know, that like really like bassy kind of like painful sound. And it's because that sound is clustered with a whole like set of bodily sensations, which is like physically unpleasant. And after I untangled the chronic pain condition, I was like, I'm a superhero. I can literally turn off any response in the brain. But I mean, maybe I just don't get as much practice with traffic. But it's been, I have as yet been unable to stop my strong aversion and from arising when people are making those particular noises, because it feels like it's gripping so many layers, like I'm being punched in every sense or something, and anger arises and I cannot get neutrality to arise. So I'm just wondering,
this is the thing, yeah. And you're asking all the right questions. So first, let's ask the question, how does it arise? Like the sound comes into your environment, it falls on your ear, and then a corresponding conjunction takes place.
Yeah, ear and body, because like those frequencies, like they're literally physically affecting you. Have you had the sensation a truck goes by with like bass or something and you're like, wow, that's interesting, I feel that in my feet, you know? It's
You're
like,
talking about touch there, so that's another sense. So the same thing.
yeah,
It's rising, and you know what? You point out that it doesn't arise by itself. Maybe it arises in your sense of hearing and your sense of touch because you're feeling the vibration. Maybe you smell the exhaust from that thing, so you're smelling it at the same time, and so your senses are getting overloaded.
yeah, it's a very big thicket. Exactly, that's exactly it. It's like an overload in a big thicket. And I think, like in my experience at that point, it's very hard to come in and do this kind of like surgical extraction of a sensation like you might be able to do with like a coffee cup, where you're like, okay, can I be neutral toward this guitar? Yes, I can, with intent to be. I can actually do that. The
So
motorcycle, not yet.
here comes some interesting, you guys tell me what you think. So when that thing arises and we have this experience and the mind comes to meet it, where does the choice happen? Where does the choice happen of, I like this or I don't like this? And is it possible to exist without that choice?
Hopefully
Yeah.
it is.
So
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to make light of that, but I mean, that's why I practice, is that I can see, that I can break it down. I don't know where the choice is. That's the question you're asking. I don't see that as much as I'd like to, put it that way. Small
you have to
things.
make a choice.
Yeah, I don't see where, but I believe it's there.
Yeah. Do you have to make a choice?
I
Can
suppose.
you exist in the awareness of it, even sensory overload, without necessarily, is it possible? Just is it possible? Not necessarily are you doing that, but is it possible to just.
This is why I brought this up, because I'm very irritated by this, because I think it is possible. I think there's a part of our brain that is usually unconscious that is actually making that choice. And what's really cool is that I've been able to, at times, like really work with it and get it not to make that choice or to make a different choice. And I am so irritated that I cannot, at myself, that I cannot do this with this particular type of noise.
So is it a choice?
It's not a conscious
Or
choice.
is it more like Chris and the lamp, where he just calls it a lamp? He made a choice. That's a lamp, right? And he made his choice that that's a lamp because he has a history with lamps. Now, if, like Vicky said, and it was a foreign object that you weren't familiar with, I don't know that I have a, try this. Here's a foreign object you may not be familiar with. Can you not make a choice about what it is? If I hold it this way, it kind of looks like a coffin, and all of a sudden you make a choice.
Like a coffin for a Barbie doll.
But if I told you that it's actually just a broken piece of a wind chime that hangs at the bottom so that the wind chime rings,
Yeah.
and you bring that awareness into what it is and make a choice, okay, it's not a coffin, it's just a nice object. It's a wind chime. I like wind chimes, right?
Well, I think to that, it's an element where, and I've done this in meditation, where I notice a sensation arises, or I observe a thing, and then I there's a thrown way of the being just simply saying good, bad, indifferent. I like that. I hate that, and not even knowing why that judgment is made, and it's a kind of like this idea of a judgment, and then asking oneself, there's a sensation. What about this sensation? Let's talk about this sensation we're experiencing. Like, I see that wood thingy or whatever it is, right? See this thingy. What is this thingy? And you know that there's a part of it where part of your kind of automatic sense is going to say, is this a good thingy or a bad thingy? Right? And then
So,
and you know that there's another option, which is it's a neither good nor bad thingy.
right.
And so it's just a thingy. So I hear a noise. I think there was one time I was doing a walking meditation, and the neighbors it was not mowing the lawn. They were doing something else, because it's like they had this perpetual saw going. It's like yay in the background. And I was like, I hear a noise. Is this a good noise? It's like, what do I think about this noise? Tell me about this noise. Is it a pleasant noise or an unpleasant noise? And just trying to make an assessment. And I was desperate to make it a noise I could ignore.
It didn't work?
It didn't work.
Yeah.
I struggled and failed miserably at it. But
It's a barrier to
mind sense that it's something we ought to ignore. This mind sense.
right.
Let's look at that as a sense. You have a sense. There's a saw, and I should be able to ignore it. Or, Alina, you have this sound of traffic noise. The thing that makes me think is that, could it be that there's some other thing in your memory that's specific to you that may or may not cause that trigger? That there's a thing about that, some memory that you have, like me and my couch, that it happens to trigger.
It's just literally like, well, okay, look, let's take this to the extreme. If somebody takes a knife and is knifing me in the stomach, that is not I cannot make that a neutral sensation. It is an unpleasant sensation. I should turn around and walk away. I think this is actually I think these low frequency noises, and I've read research on this, are like very irritating to like the human body. Like they're a stress thing. And I've been trying to see if I can like unwire the stress response, but it is actually a body level thing where the body's like, we don't like this. Can you please move us away? But it's like on the scale between somebody is currently putting a knife into me and nothing is happening. It's like, I do think it is a body level thing. Like I tried to probe for like some secret trauma around this. No, I think it's actually like my body dislikes the sound, and it's like telling me to get away from the sound by alerting my attention to it. And then I'm trying to like see if I can unhook that whole chain, but it's very physical. You know what I mean? It's like, I guess that's why I wanted to bring it up, but I'm sorry, I might have derailed us because
No, not really. I feel like this is the thing, and
okay, because hearing,
yeah.
but it's a hearing, but then it connects to this whole thicket, right? And it's like, then it's so big and I can't unhook it. And it's interesting. Yeah, with the chainsaw noise example, you also couldn't quite unhook it even though you were trying.
It's all back to practice. Let's look at practice and why we do the things we do here, right? Because we use noting. And what's the advice? The advice is to note it. I'm hearing, and then let it go. I note that it's happening, but I don't necessarily bring with me, I'm hearing and I have this history or this thought or this feeling or this thing or this whatever that I'm bringing to it. I'm just noting I'm hearing. hearing, hearing, hearing. And I'm noticing that even the things I hear, they come and go. Things that I taste, the things I smell, the things that I touch, the things that I think about, they arise and they pass away. So at the root of that, clearly, at the root of that hearing for you, there is fear and there is tension and there's a physical experience and there's a mental experience, and they're all arising, and you can see how they arise. And the recommendation from Siddhartha here is to notice that they do, because we're making an argument. We're looking at a bigger picture. This is just one part. The answer isn't found in hearing that object right or seeing that object right. It's an understanding how we hear and see and think and what that interaction is about. So when we see this, you're seeing the whole thing unfold. And another interesting aspect is to ask the question. So there's a part of us that says, okay, I'm hearing this and I feel like this is the right way, or I feel that this is the wrong way, or it's important to me because I want to guard the good things and I want to push away the bad things. And I'm asking if that sensation, that itch that asks that question, good or bad, should I keep this? Should I throw it away? If that sensation is in and of itself not any different than, say, smelling something, like the sensation that it should be different, or I should do something, or this is that, or maybe I ought to be like this, or I ought to do like that, or I ought to think about this way, or if I'm doing it right, it goes like that. Is that sensation not really any different than smelling a fart? It comes, it's unpleasant, it passes away. Can we see that that happens with those things in a constant stream of, like we said, I close my eyes, I hear something. I stop hearing something, I smell something. I stop smelling something, I'm thinking about something. And I'm moving from this sensation to that sensation as things come about. And how do they come about? An object falls into your form of vision. You see it. The corresponding conjunction takes place. And then something happens. So let's stick with that. It's 11 o'clock already, and you've already taken lots of time. And I want to invite anybody to hear this out as much more as they want. But let's just look at some of the other senses here really quick and think about this. And here's what I invite for these ones. Think if you can think of an example. So like, can a single whiff transport me to a different time or place, sparking desire? How do I navigate these sensory memories? I can give you a good example of this one. The smell of wrapping paper and pine trees. The smell of wrapping paper and pine trees is the smell of Christmas.
Mm.
The smell of popcorn at a movie theater. And that you walk into a movie theater and you get the smell of popcorn. Is that a taste experience too? The smell of hay in a barn. The smell of hay in a barn may have significance to you if you work on a ranch. Once I worked at a winery, the smell of the wine fermenting, I'll never forget. And it takes me back to that memory of winery. Can you think of other smells that take you back?
Perfumes.
Perfumes.
Especially ones, you know, like you wore like in high school and they like don't make them anymore. You don't wear them anymore. And yeah, you go back and you can remember that smell. And that totally takes you back to that period in time.
Yeah, I've had that experience where like for a certain period of time, I was using a certain brand of shampoo. Mm-hmm. And so that if I use that brand of shampoo later, then all of a sudden the thoughts just leap back into my head from that time in my life. You guys have similar experiences?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll keep going. Let's do tongue. So in tasting something delightful or distasteful, what arises in me? Is it just taste, or is there more to savor and spurn? Let's say you tasted bad milk.
Right.
A lot of things leap up.
I was thinking about this sensation earlier in the talk, because I still had a sensation of the coffee I drank earlier. And it was really present. And I was thinking about, because you were asking about like where is that sensation coming from really, right? And I kind of feel a kind of little residue on my tongue, but in fact the flavor of the coffee, the bitterness of the black coffee actually is lingering somewhere in my mind. And I'm reflecting. It's like I have this sensation and I attach to it, this is coffee that you drank a while ago.
Can you get the sense of like, okay, first the mind comes out and meets it, says it's coffee, and then you register coffee, and then you have another sense of liking, disliking, or neutral, that, okay, I like coffee, I had my warm coffee this morning, and then another sense that comes along that says, I am comfortable because I got to have my coffee.
Yeah, all
right?
of that.
Like, and if I didn't have that, and I was like, then I might be like, I didn't get to have my coffee.
Didn't get something missing on my tongue. It needs to be some coffee.
There you go. There you go. And that's a really nice small example, but a lot of things that's true about, right? Like my couch. Like, gee, I want to feel comfortable in my home. So maybe if I don't have to see this couch, then I can be comfortable in my home. Well, where's the discomfort happen? We'll keep going. Almost there. So touch, tactile sensation. This is another real good and obvious one. And I like all the examples that have come up today of how we experience touch, even from the other senses. How does physical sensation influence my state of mind? In moments of comfort or discomfort, what lessons lie beneath the surface? So, example of that for me has been, it's been a long, cold winter. And I don't know about you guys, but the sun just came out here like over the past few days, and it's really the first sun. And so you step out into that sunlight and almost subconsciously your entire body goes, it like feels absorbing the vitamin E. I haven't seen this in a while. And a sense overcomes me that's like, the sun's back. Thank goodness. Because during the cold winter, I was also very present to the cold winter. When I came back from Hawaii in the winter, it got so cold and muddy and wet here so fast that I immediately was averse to that. And then I found myself going, look, I can't be just chicken from the cold. It can't be that this totally takes over my mood in the way that it does. So I decided I would refuse that, and I would gain some strength from the cold. And I started taking my hat off when it was raining so that the cold wind and snow and stuff would go across my bald head, and just greeting that with like, nope, you know what? I'm just not going to be intimidated by the cold and the wet. I'm going to find a way to stay here and not worry about the discomfort, not hold the discomfort. Let the discomfort pass and just be with this. And so all winter I've been doing that. And all winter I've grown to where I've really, here's my cold. Let's roll the window down instead of keep it up. Let's be cold. And then the sunlight came, and my whole body of its own accord, my mind of its own accord, met the sunlight with, I feel better now. I feel safe. I feel so much better. And then I noticed something very strange. A longing for the cold. A longing for the cold already. Like with the first sunshine. It's like, the sun. But that's cold's been giving me resilience. I want my cold back. And so I really, this is all very personal experience, but I really did experience this all this winter, where it's like, I'm grateful for the sun, I'm grateful for the cold. Can you be grateful for both? Can we be content in the cold and then content in the sun? Is that sense that arises the fetter that comes about and says, I don't like cold, or it's too hot, or any of those things? Can we see where the mind arises, where the fetter comes to be, and can we abandon it? So when you look at my slides here, each one of them, I put this on it. We ask the question, we look at the sense, but we see what the Buddha said. He discerns the fetter that arises upon both. He discerns that there is a rising of an unarisen fetter. We saw that. Each one of us saw fetters arise when we saw something, or felt it, or smelt it, or tasted it. We discern the abandoning of the fetter once it's been risen. I'm not going to be afraid of the cold. I can handle it. I'm not going to reject the sunlight. It's okay that I'm warm. And he discerns how in the future there's no arising of a fetter that has been abandoned. I don't have to be afraid of the cold anymore. I never have to worry when I hear a motorcycle, because I've seen where my mind rises to that sound, and I see that it's transient, so I can let it go. And later on, I'm gonna put my laundry away, and then I won't have to worry about it because I won't see it there. So the truth is that this is what he's saying. So back to the mind. This is the last. So we think of the mind as a thing that is subjected to the senses. This argument is different. This argument is the mind is a sense, the same as seeing or smelling or tasting or touching. Observing my thoughts, do I find them leading me towards peace or turmoil? What do my mental patterns reveal about my deepest attachments and aversions? Do I find them leading me towards mental peace or turmoil? So can we see that as our thoughts arise, the thought isn't just that there is a guitar there, but that I want more happiness and peace by experiencing playing guitar better, so I should be practicing more. Or I see my coffee cup and I go, I really got to get back to it. Like, can we see how those things arise? Can we abandon it so that we're not clinging, and then just experience these senses just raw, choiceless awareness? If you get to where you can experience them raw, and you're not going to make a choice, you hear that motorcycle, brum, 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 goes the motorcycle, and immediately you sense in yourself fear. Can you see the fear? Can you see how the fear arose? Can you see what the root of the fear might be? If you see the root of the fear, is it possible for you to let go of that root so that it never bothers you again? If you see the things you love and you want them in your life and you're keeping them in your life, you've got that there. Can you keep the things you love in your life knowing they're going to change? You'll have to let them go one day. But on this day, you get to love them fully and completely. Because that's inherentness. It's a different argument. It's the argument that there is a thing happening. It's not just that you're an entity getting it right or getting it wrong. That the judgment of you are getting it right or getting it wrong is a sense, like taste or seeing. If you wrap your mind around that sense, if you see that, what do you think? Do you think that that leads you to less illusion or more illusion? Like seeing it, doesn't it lead to less illusion? And with less illusion, isn't there less to cling to? And with less to cling to, how does it arise? In this way, he remains focusedly internally on the mental qualities in and of themselves, or focused externally, unsustained by anything in the world. This is how a monk remains focused on mental qualities in and of themselves, with reference to the sixfold internal and external sense media. So, again, we come to where we unravel so much. It's one paragraph. If we look at our sutta, it's just this part. And as we look deeply, there's a lot more going on there than we see on its surface. But the practice of just seeing it arise, seeing where the mind comes out to meet it, that's what he's recommending. He's recommending that you see it, you see how it arises, you see how it passes away. That's the recommendation of Sixfold Sense Media, given us a lot to think about, and I've talked a very long time. At this point, I'll conclude for today. Next week, we'll wrap up with the last thing of mind states that he wants us to talk about, and that's the factors of enlightenment. And then we have just a few more sections left to complete this sutta. So I thank you for joining me. A lot of things to think about, and I invite discussion. Anybody else got any thoughts, places they want to correct me, or places they're not sure? I am open to discussion. If not,
unpack with the mind, with the
always,
mind, you know?
always, every one of these profound things to be seen here. We're seeing firsthand, we are not just our one sense. It's not just not feeling of, boy, if everything's just right in my environment, everything's just great. You know, we're not we're not those five senses. And that there is, in fact, a sense that is your mind that's driving and doing things. Just sensation, same as like I hear a thing, it falls onto my ear, corresponding conjunction takes place. Well, if something falls into my mind, then a corresponding conjunction takes place, and then something happens. And that's what we're pointing to. So this week, practice with this. See where your mind is greeting things. When you're having an experience of aversion or clinging or a physical sense or seeing or smelling or tasting, when you're seeing those things, look to see where your mind rises to meet that sensation. And with that, I'll conclude for today. All right, and I'm going to share my screen and our service the way that we always conclude, with our loving kindness and salutation to the triple gem. Bear with me while I open it up here. May we abide in well-being, in freedom from affliction, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may we maintain well-being in ourselves. May everyone abide in well-being, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may they maintain well-being in themselves. May all beings be released from all suffering, and may they not be parted from the good fortune they have attained. When they act upon intention, all beings are the owners of their action and inherit its results. Their future is born from such action, companion to such action, and its results will be their home. All actions with intention, be they skillful or harmful, of such acts they will be the heirs. And we'll conclude with a salutation to the triple gem. Araham Sama Sambuddho Bhagava Buddham Bhagavantam Abhivademi. Swagato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammam Namasami. Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sangham Namami. Thanks for bearing with me through a long talk. I enjoyed the examination. Feel free to stick around if you can and visit with me some more. Other than that, have a nice week. See you next time.
Thank you, Pete.
I think.
You bet.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Bye for now.
Thank you.